Chapter 3: Tribe, Belonging, and Collective Identity. Imagine meeting someone for the first time. Within minutes, you discover that they grew up in the same town, attended the same university, served in the same branch of the military, belong to the same faith, or perhaps simply support the same sports team. Something often changes immediately. The conversation becomes easier. A sense of familiarity appears. Trust arrives more quickly. A subtle feeling emerges. This person is one of us. The strange thing is that almost nothing meaningful has yet been learned about the individual. You do not know their character. You do not know their values. You do not know their history. And yet a feeling of connection has already begun. Why? Why do human beings form groups so naturally? Why does belonging feel so important? And why does the distinction between us and them appear so consistently throughout human history? The answer begins with something we explored in the previous chapter. Human beings do not merely learn from one another. We learn together. And wherever people learn together, live together, and cooperate together, groups begin to emerge. Families, communities, clans, tribes, organizations, nations, civilizations. Human beings seem remarkably adept at transforming collections of individuals into shared identities. Part of this reflects a simple reality. Groups solve problems. A lone individual faces the world alone. A group provides resources, protection, information, and support. Throughout most of human history, belonging to a group dramatically improved the chances of survival. Groups could defend territory, share food, raise children, transmit knowledge, care for members during hardship. Isolation, by contrast, often carried significant risks. Seen from this perspective, the human attraction to belonging begins to make sense. Groups were not merely social conveniences, they were adaptive advantages. Yet belonging offers more than practical benefits. It also answers psychological questions. Who am I? Where do I fit? Who are my people? What larger story am I part of? These questions appear repeatedly throughout human life. Many of our identities emerge not first from introspection, but from participation. We discover ourselves partly through the groups to which we belong. Family identities, religious identities, national identities, professional identities, cultural identities. The individual self develops within a social context. Long before most children can explain who they already know who we are. This may help explain why belonging feels emotionally significant in ways that often exceed practical necessity. People do not merely join groups, they identify with them. The group's successes feel personal. Its failures feel personal. Its threats feel personal. Its victories feel personal. The boundary between individual identity and collective identity becomes surprisingly permeable. A sports fan may celebrate a championship as though they participated directly. A citizen may feel pride in national achievements they played no role in creating. A member of a community may feel wounded when that community is criticized. Something larger than the individual has become incorporated into the individual's sense of self. This process is neither irrational nor unusual. It appears to be deeply human. Human beings are not merely selfish creatures pursuing individual interests. We are also groupish creatures capable of extraordinary cooperation within shared identities. We bond, coordinate, sacrifice, protect, contribute. These tendencies have repeatedly allowed groups to accomplish things that isolated individuals never could. Much of civilization depends upon these capacities. At this point, another pattern begins to emerge. In the previous chapter, we explored how human beings inherit knowledge socially. Here we discover that they inherit identity socially as well. No one invents themselves entirely from scratch. Every person enters a world already populated by languages, traditions, communities, symbols, loyalties, and stories. Long before we consciously choose our identities, many aspects of identity have already been offered to us. We inherit circles of belonging before we begin evaluating them. The self develops inside larger social realities. This insight helps explain one of civilization's most remarkable achievements. Human beings can cooperate far beyond the scale of immediate family relationships. We can feel connected to people we have never met. Citizens of the same nation, members of the same faith, participants in the same culture, supporters of the same cause, residents of the same city. The larger the circle becomes, the more extraordinary the achievement appears. Civilization depends upon expanding cooperation beyond direct personal relationships, and collective identity often serves as one of the bridges that makes such cooperation possible. Yet every strength carries a shadow. The same instincts that create solidarity can create exclusion. The same forces that create loyalty can create hostility. The same identities that unite one group can divide it from another. Every we quietly creates the possibility of a they. This pattern appears throughout history. Families compete with families, tribes compete with tribes, nations compete with nations, political movements compete with political movements, religious communities compete with religious communities. The forms change, the underlying pattern remains surprisingly familiar. One of the recurring themes of this book is that many civilizational realities contain both benefits and costs. Belonging is no exception. Without belonging, cooperation becomes difficult. Without belonging, meaning often weakens. Without belonging, social trust can become fragile, yet belonging can also narrow perspective, encourage conformity, intensify conflict. The challenge is not eliminating tribal instincts. The challenge is learning how to live with them wisely. Human history can, in many ways, be understood as the gradual expansion of belonging. The earliest circles were small: family, clan, tribe. Over time, larger circles emerged. Cities, kingdoms, religions, nations, civilizations. Each expansion allowed cooperation among larger numbers of people. Individuals who would never meet could begin to see themselves as members of the same larger group. This may be one of civilization's greatest achievements, the expansion of the circle of us, yet the expansion is never complete. The tension remains. Human beings continue balancing loyalty to smaller groups with participation in larger ones. Family and society, community and nation, nation and humanity. These loyalties need not always conflict, but neither do they disappear. The challenge of civilization is not to erase belonging. It is to broaden it, to cultivate identities strong enough to create meaning and cooperation, yet open enough to avoid captivity. Healthy belonging provides roots. It tells us where we come from, who we are, what we value. But healthy belonging also leaves room for curiosity, for learning, for expanding the circle, for recognizing the humanity of people beyond our immediate group. The strongest identities are often not the most rigid, they are the most secure. A pattern should now be becoming visible. In Chapter 1, we discovered that human beings are social creatures. In Chapter 2, we discovered that social creatures learn from one another continuously. In this chapter, we discover that they also organize themselves into circles of belonging. The result is that civilization begins to appear not as something imposed from above, but as something emerging from below. Relationships become communities. Communities become identities. Identities become larger systems of cooperation. Civilization grows from these layers. Closing orientation. Human beings are creatures who belong. We seek connection, community, recognition, shared identity. This tendency has helped us survive, cooperate, and build civilizations. Yet it has also contributed to some of our deepest conflicts. The story of civilization is therefore not the story of overcoming tribalism. It is the story of continually expanding the boundaries of belonging while retaining the bonds that make belonging meaningful. We do not merely live together. We do not merely learn together. We organize ourselves into groups, and from those groups emerge the larger structures of collective life. Civilization begins there. Part 1 began with a newborn child, a vulnerable creature dependent upon others. From there we explored sociality, learning, and belonging. Together, these three realities reveal something important about the builders of civilization. Human beings are social creatures. They learn socially. They organize socially. Civilization emerges from those capacities. Yet another question now presents itself. If human beings share these characteristics, why do they so often disagree? Why do intelligent, sincere, well-intentioned people frequently see the same reality in profoundly different ways? To answer that question, we must turn our attention from groups themselves to the lenses through which human beings interpret the world. The next part of our journey explores those lenses,